Should the governments completely control the markets or just leave them to the price mechanism to demand and supply? Every single economy in the world answers this question differently. In this video, we are going to be looking at the role of governments in an economy. Hi friends, welcome to Econverse. I'm Abrar and I'm a fellow student who topped in my GCSE Economics last year in Oman. On this channel, we make learning economics simpler, clearer, and hopefully a lot more fun. In this video, let's look at the role of governments. Let's get started.
Video, we are going to be looking at the role of governments. So when we analyze the role of governments, I think it is important to understand that the role of governments can change from economy to economy. It is not the same in every economy because every economy has their own ways of dealing with the issues. So in a mixed economy, how much the government intervenes is actually largely dependent on the perceived extent of market failure and the effectiveness of government policies. So now let us start off by looking at the local or plus national level role of governments. So when we look at local or national levels, we have to understand that the governments can function in several ways. So let's start off by understanding how governments can act as producers. So the governments can act as producers in perhaps three main ways. So firstly, you have your natural monopolies. So what I mean by a natural monopoly is an industry where a single firm, which is a public sector firm or a state-owned enterprise, that can produce at a lower average cost than most other firms because of the significant economies of scale, making the industry incompetent, or it is just such a industry that is dominated by the government that no other firms try to compete in that market. Like for example, in India this could be taken as the state electricity boards. And then we have another one, which is strategic industries. Strategic industries could be stuff like these industries are the industries that are most important for the defense and the overall development of the country. For example, the best example of this would be the defense industry. So the governments look to ensure that their best key strategic industries perform really well, such as the defense. And then last but not the least, we have national champions. Now this is really important. So national champions are essentially the industries in a economy that have the potential to be world leaders or highly successful brands. These are backed by the government as they provide massive tax revenue. For example, in India, this could be taken as the Reliance group of industries. And now, that is one role of governments as producers, to ensure that they produce these three types of industries, that they support these three types of industries. They ensure the strategic industries run well, they run natural monopolies such as state-owned enterprises, and they back their national champions. So that is one role as producers. Now the second role, the more important role, could be regulators. In some ways, they need to ensure that market equilibrium is achieved and they avoid unfair practices. What do I mean by unfair practices? Let me just highlight all of the important bits or the roles of governments so that becomes easier to see. Producer, regulator. So they need to regulate the industries to ensure that there is market equilibrium, there's no market failure, and there is no exploitation of people. And then the governments have to act as collector of taxes. So they need to ensure that there is an infrastructure and promote the usage of merit goods with social benefits via incentivized prices to consumers that is funded by taxes. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that they need to collect taxes and ensure that it is allocated for the production of merit goods and for social welfare spending, government spending, that essentially has a massive benefit on the people of the economy. And then the governments need to act as director of level of economic activity. So essentially, the governments need to keep in mind the macroeconomic aims of the country and aim to regulate monetary and fiscal policies. Now we look at these when we do the videos on the policy making of governments ahead in the future. So they need to regulate fiscal and monetary policies to meet aims such as low inflation, etc. And then last but not the least, the government needs to also at the local and national levels act as an employer. So the government needs to function as multiple different needs to function in multiple different roles in order to ensure that the economy thrives and succeeds. So the governments can be an employer through the form of joint sectors and public sectors. So they can essentially encourage employment and ensure that there is a higher GDP and productivity of people in the country to ensure economic growth and higher standard of living. Now let us look at what governments can do at the international level. So at the international level, what governments can do is really fundamental. So the governments from country to country have different policies of trade via exports and imports, and some aim to promote free international trade, while others may not aim to promote international trade. They may look for protectionistic measures such as Trump's tariffs, for example, in the real world. Governments could also have different perspectives on allowing MNCs into their host countries. Like, for example, so we looked at trade policies, now we look at MNCs. So MNCs are another bit of a debate. So some allow MNCs into their host country as it has some advantages. It can create job creation, higher GDP, whereas it could also lead to higher competition to the markets and damage to the environment. And then at an international level, some countries also do take part in stuff you call trade blocs. Trade blocs are basically blocks of countries that form alliances which essentially promote free trade internationally. So there's no restrictions on exports and imports within their own regional group of countries. Like, for example, India is one of the countries that is part of BRICS. For example, another example could be Oman, which is a part of the GCSE trade bloc. So they have no trade restrictions among each other within their own regional blocks. Like, for example, India and Brazil, for example, in BRICS may not have tariffs or any protectionistic policies among each other, and there could be free trade between both of these. Now, that is it for the government performing at the international level. So they can have MNCs, they can have different types of views on trade, on whether to promote free trade or have protectionistic measures or even take part in trade blocs. So that is it for the role of governments at local and national levels and then at the international level.
If you think this video helped you understand economics better, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join the Econverse. I'll see you again in the next videos following the macroeconomic content library. Make sure to subscribe because here you will find the complete economics library.